Coty Sifuentes-Winter. I am the supervisory vegetation ecologist for the district and been with the district for 11 years. Prior to that, I was 10 years with the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service. And I oversee the wildland fire resiliency program, the integrated pest management program, inventory and monitoring here, and then also years.
Yep, sure. Go ahead. That's your.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alex Thomsen. I work at the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, which is a regional federal partnership organization. We're created by the USDPA, but housed within a regional government agency.
I mostly work on a regional monitoring program for wetlands, so I'll talk about some projects today that are related to that program. My educational background is in wetland restoration ecology. I studied using field and remote sensing based methods to understand where plants are popping up at a restoration site in Elkhorn Slough. And many of my projects still use GIS methods.
Hi, everybody. So great to see all of you. I'm Lynne Trulio, and I'm a professor emeritus from environmental studies at San Jose State. And I'm a wildlife ecologist and researcher. My primary areas of research are the burrowing owl. And also, I do have a line of research on recreation, impacts of recreation on wildlife. But I direct a lot of research with grad students, and they're always introducing me to new and exciting methods that are out there. And I just wanted to say it's a great time to be in wildlife ecology because so many methods and technologies are changing the face of wildlife ecology and what we can do and learn. It's a very exciting time.
Great. All right, so I'm sure you have so many projects to talk about, but I was hoping you guys could each share a project that you're especially proud of. Who wants to go first?
I can start. So one project that I worked on recently, this was a collaborative project involving another science organization and also community partners. It is an interactive map showing shoreline access. So my work is focused on the shoreline of the bay, delta, and the health of the estuary itself. So this map shows locations where people can access the shoreline around the bay, like parking lots and entrances to shoreline parks. And the points vary in size because we did some modeling to understand how many people we expect have access to these different shoreline access points by walking, biking, and driving modes of transportation. And then we also joined American Community Survey data to these access points to understand the demographics of people with access around the bay, so we can see how different demographics vary among people who live within walking or biking distance of access points. And we just released this map in the past year, so it's a relatively new product. We're sharing it with partners in the hope that it will get used by many people involved in planning and implementing shoreline access projects to understand the context of the areas that they're working, plan for things like outreach, public access features like signage that they can tailor to the different populations that live in their areas, and then potentially look at if they work in an area that has a high percentage of limited English speakers, for example, look around the region, find other areas with similar populations, and potentially learn from each other. So this is a mapping product that is built in ArcGIS Experience Builder. It's an ArcGIS online tool. Yeah.
Is it available to the public?
It
Or
is
just
available
partners?
to the public.
Okay,
Yes.
great. That's great. All right, I bet Lynn has a project she's
Yes, I
proud
do.
of.
Alex hit on a really important point, and that the combining of data sets and different types of data is very powerful. And so I want to talk about a project that I did with burrowing owls. So I'm a field ecologist and go out to the field and capture owls and collect data on them sort of that way. But I combined, my colleagues and I combined our field data with genomics data. So we worked with a genomics lab, Kristen Ruig's bird genomics lab at Colorado State. And so we gave them feathers from our birds, and they were able to tell us whether our birds were migratory or resident, and just using feathers. And we found by combining this information, we learned about the migratory status and activities of burrowing owls in California. And we also learned that some of the birds that migrate, so we get a lot of birds that migrate here in the wintertime, and then they go back up north to breed. But some of them go, hey, this is a great place to be, and they stay. And they breed with our resident birds. And we never would have known that without genomics. And the use of genetic and genomic methodologies are just changing the face of wildlife ecology and what we can know.
That is so interesting, Lynn. Oh, Coty.
Thanks, Casey. One of the projects that I'm most proud of was in 2018, we started to experience a really big uptake in the number of fires throughout California. And I was tasked with spearheading and project managing our wildland fire resiliency program. This program took 4 years for us to write up. And one of the things that, besides the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this thing, literally, was a GIS model that looks at a whole host of different data that we helped to define the criteria of where we should do work. Midpen is quite a large organization in terms of the amount of acreage we have, about 72,000 acres. We share jurisdiction with 12 different fire agencies, which means that I have 12 people telling me that their stuff is the most important to do to the work. And when you have that many acres and you only have so many staff members and so a finite amount of resources, we need to figure out how do we prioritize this work. And it was very difficult to be able to do it. So we came up with a set of rules. These are the criteria that we use for prioritization, and shopped them around to all the different fire agencies and got them to agree, yes, these are the important things, without showing them any maps. We didn't want to show them any maps. We wanted to get them on board with this without playing what I would call politics, I guess. Really using science-based information. And so the data sets that we intake includes things like the Southern Oak death information that we have that UC Berkeley does. And so we brought that data into our GIS model. We also brought in evacuation routes, really important communication towers, looking at those areas in which people might not be able to get out if a fire happens. So nursing homes, hospitals, and really focusing in on where those are at throughout the area, along with what species actually can use fire, what species are dependent on fire. So our manzanitas, our rare manzanitas or fire followers that we have. And we put this into a GIS model, and I wish I could say I did it, but I had the help from Casey's team to help me out here. But we run this model every year now, and it highlights to us those areas that meet the most criteria that we can go in and do the really important work of fire resiliency.
Thank you, Coty. And I'll share a project that I'm proud of as well. So for my thesis, I used data from the Lassen Peak region on the Sierra Nevada red fox, and I predicted its habitat across the entire Sierra Nevadas. And it's been great. The model got published, and then Yosemite used it to find the Sierra Nevada red fox for the first time in 100 years. So they had been putting cameras out there trying to locate them, but when they used my model, they put the cameras out. They hiked in 4 days to get to my locations and said it was 95% probability, and they found the red fox the first night. So it was pretty exciting for thesis research. So yeah. All right. Okay. The next question we have: can you describe a project you worked on where technology or data meaningfully changed the conservation outcome? Who wants to go first? Yeah.
Okay, I have the mic. Okay, well, I'll give you a project that I think will change conservation outcomes that I hope. I one of my grad students, Erin LaCour, studied. So one of the things is great about new techniques is there are a lot of wildlife observation techniques where we're learning about wildlife where we don't have to capture them and pull feathers out of them and stuff like that. There are lots of really great techniques. So my student Erin LaCour used a camera trap array in the East Bay to look at the response of wildlife to trails, and in particular, she wanted to determine if there was a difference in the way species responded to walking and jogging versus mountain biking. And that's a big question that managers of open spaces have right now, how to deal with mountain biking. So she combined the camera trap data with Strava data. Does everybody know what Strava is? Yeah. So she was able to get the social app data and use that as a proxy for trail use intensity. And so it's not the absolute number, but it's an index of the number. And so she found some very interesting results, and we published her paper. Yay! Okay, and we hope that having that out there will help to change, will help to inform managers about how to manage mountain bikes and in sensitive habitats.
What was the results like?
Okay.
Can you like between hiking and or running and biking? Did you find anything?
Well, what we found was that, and by the way, Erin was an amazing student. I learned all kinds of new statistical methods from her. She was incredible. Well, we found that because these were existing trails, the animals had already altered their behavior. So most of the species that we looked at, and they were larger mammals, were moving towards a nocturnal behavior, even if they're more diurnal species, because they're avoiding people. So it was very hard to tease out, and it's very hard to tease out the difference between different trail uses when they're occurring in the same place. But what she did find was that mule deer and brush rabbits were especially sensitive to mountain bikers.
Okay.
And so those could be used as a baseline, and you could use them, collect data on them and then use them as an index for when things change. So we also found that there were a lot of western gray squirrels. They were far from the trails, but there was a lot of open space for them. And so if you provide enough open space, that can help to manage them. So.
Well, I'll share more about the conservation outcomes that this shoreline access map was designed to influence. I work with it's a work group involving lots of external experts that advises on my work. They include social scientists, community experts, environmental justice experts, government agency representatives, and many others. And this group has been really passionate about wanting to understand what groups are underrepresented among visitors to the shoreline, really recognizing the value that spending time along the shoreline and in nature generally brings to people, to build community, to build sense of place, to clear people's minds and improve mental health and provide physical recreation opportunities. So that was a big driving force of this project, wanting to have some data to understand what groups might be underrepresented among visitors. And the data that our tool shows is modeled data. It shows who we expect might be visiting these places based on proximity of where they live. And we think this can be compared to actual on-the-ground data that many organizations, park districts, and others do collect on visitors so that they can see among the visitors we might predict have access by different modes of transportation. What are we seeing in the demographics of actual visitors? What groups are we seeing are underrepresented in actual visitors? And we have some other projects starting to think about ways that we can actually address these gaps in what groups are more or less represented.
So I talked about my the fire program that we got started, and after it was published, about a year into it, I get a call for emergency management from Hawaii, asking me, "Hey, can you give a presentation on your guys' fire program?" So I gave that presentation, and then a month later, I had the state of Connecticut call me, "Hey, can I get a presentation on your fire program?" And ended up giving about 4 or 5 different presentations to different states about how we go about doing this. And they got me thinking about, well, how do we figure out where we do our weed work that we do, our invasive species? And so I really started to dig into our IPM program, Integrated Pest Management Program, and realized that I could use the same sort of principles that we did in the fire program. And so started working on that. And so that project is, going along very swimmingly right now. Hopefully I get it to a place that we can actually start to enact it over the next year. But some of the stuff that we decided to do was to start bringing in community science into our data. And so we use, anybody here know iNaturalist? I bet a bunch of you do. So I actually get an email from iNaturalist on a weekly basis that says, this is all the things that we saw, not just in your preserves, but surrounding your preserves. And we use it as our eyes and ears. We have 300 employees, give or take, at Midpen and 70,000 acres. There's no way for us to cover all that land in any particular time. And so through the power of community science, I can now see what data is coming in. What do we have existing on the lands? Now, I don't take it at face value. I don't go, oh, this person saw this rare plant, so it must be a rare plant, and I use that data. But we use it as a way for us to sort of send a clue to myself, hey, I need to send a biologist out there to go check this thing out and see what it is. It's amazing how many people find rare plants. So we started taking in that data, and we use that data just like I did for the fire program as one of our criteria. It helps us know where we have our rare plants. It helps us know where we have invasive species and where those two overlap, right? So with 70,000 acres, I don't want to just go out and just work on weeds willy-nilly here, there, or elsewhere, but I want to go to those places that really matter to us. What is the conservation value of this area? What area is most important to us that we want to protect? And those areas could be everything from where we have California red-legged frogs, or maybe San Francisco garter snakes, or maybe most beautiful jewel flower. So looking at where those are and then understanding what the invasive species are there and how bad an invasive species is and what that impact is really feeds into this GIS model. And part of the GIS model also includes data sets that are outside of what Midpen does. So I use a lot of climate refugia information that the state produces, and I bring that in. And I thought when I ran this model, I was pretty sure I knew what places we're going to highlight and say these are our conservation values. And I was blown away when I was surprised by how many areas that I was like, I didn't really think about that. I didn't realize that this data here or this area here was so important for so many different species, for wildlife corridors, for that refugia, and being forward thinking and thinking about what the future is going to be like and making sure that we maintain those areas for those species that are having a difficult time right now.
Is that a statewide layer, the climate refugia? I hadn't heard about that. How long has that been out for? 4 years. Oh, okay. See, I'm out of GIS now since I'm just managing it. All right. So the next question, it's going to focus on cross-discipline collaboration. So being focused on conservation technology for my entire career, it's really been very important to have that cross-discipline collaboration. So for me, when I did my thesis on the Sierra Nevada red fox, I found a researcher at UC Berkeley that was collecting all of the data, but I could see that he wasn't producing any papers based on any spatial analysis or predictive habitat analysis. So I contacted him and offered my services to collaborate, and he was very excited. So I got to bring my background in spatial analysis and collaborate with him, and we were able to create some really amazing maps. So for me, I'm always working with the conservation professionals and the ecologists and the biologists. So that's what this question is focused on. So what partnerships or cross-discipline collaboration made a project possible?
I'll continue talking about invasive species because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Um, part of the idea behind working on invasive species is that conservation value. And so I put down what I thought was going to be the best information that we would want to get. I ended up talking with our wildlife biologist, our water resources people, our visitor service people, and there was a lot of things that I learned that I did not know about wildlife, about water resources, and how they sort of apply to what we consider to be a resource value. It was just really important to reach out and be an interdisciplinary team to really have a good understanding of what resources we have out in our lands and what we want to protect. And so without the interdisciplinary, I don't pretend, and I don't think any of us up here would pretend that we know everything that we need to know for a project. In fact, with my entire team, we probably maybe know 5% of something. The Santa Cruz Mountains has about 3,600 species of plants, about 80 species of mammals. I don't even want to count the number of different insects. There's no way, with all the interactions that are going on there, there's no way that any one person or even a team of 10 could understand all that stuff that's going on. So reaching out to not just my department, my natural resources department, but reaching out to our visitor services, to our docents, to our visitors, getting reports from them, and then reaching out to our partner agencies. It's just so important to reach out to those partner agencies that they might have data that we just don't have, that we didn't even know that we didn't have. There's a little saying about you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. That's just reaching out and asking people goes a long way.
Well, I definitely agree with Coty about only knowing about 5% of the information that's needed for each project. I work on a small team, and so we have to be very adaptable and form a lot of collaborations to bring together all the different forms of knowledge that are needed for each project. So in the Shoreline Access project I described, I mentioned this was informed by a work group of different external experts. My program includes a lot of these work groups, and it's really valuable because they bring in the perspective of the community so that the work that we do is valuable to the people who are living in this environment and maybe benefiting from the work. It brings in social scientists because we often have a lot of social ecological benefits questions that the community cares about. And it brings in people who may actually be able to use the data so that as we're designing the tools, designing the studies, we're thinking ahead to how do we think people can use this? What are the questions that they have that we're trying to answer? And then we can tailor the studies and the resulting tools and visualizations to those uses, like restoration practitioners, permitters, funders, and others. I'll also share that the Shoreline Access Project was a collaboration between my organization, which is primarily focused on planning and funding and governance of the monitoring program. And we worked with a scientific organization called the San Francisco Estuary Institute, who generated the data. And like Casey, I am often managing the projects and not getting to do all of the fun GIS stuff. So it's nice to be able to work with a team and have people who have really specific skills and be able to generate the GIS data. And then I can help with the community connections and putting it into a visualization tool.
Okay. I'm going to go big. About 20 years ago, I was the lead scientist for the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project during its planning phase. And in order to plan the project, it required the collaboration of many, many, many different kinds of people. So I was the lead scientist, and we had a team of scientists of all kinds of different, with all kinds of different expertise. in order to understand the South Bay system, what we knew, what we didn't know, and what we needed to know in order to implement the restoration. And so we had, hydrologists and geologists and ecologists, fish people, and so we all worked together to provide the science that the project needed. It was a completely collaborative enterprise, which was so much fun. And these are a bunch of scientists who really wanted to get something done. They weren't like, let's just study it forever. No, they wanted to get this done. And then we worked with the project management team, which was land managers and also planners, and the engineering team, and also the regulators. So it was a very large project, and there was collaboration at every single step of the way. And now it's 20 years on, and it's going great. And it's still being implemented, and I hope you have visited some of the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project sites. They're amazing.
That's great. All right, so for the next question, what I'm going to ask you is, can you share a moment when the data surprised you and it led to a different conclusion? Does anyone have any examples of that?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll start. So, as you can tell, I'm a research scientist. I design studies to answer questions that people have, that I have, that my students have. I go into a project, I design the research, and I routinely will go, why am I even doing this? I know what the answer is. I'm just going to collect some data. I'm always wrong. It's not that I'm wrong, it's so much more complicated than we can imagine. And so just by undertaking these projects, you just see nature in a way that you can't know until you go out and you see it and you study it and enjoy the beauty of it also. And so I just think that happens kind of like all the time for me.
I'll give an example from my graduate research, which was at Elkhorn Slough in the Monterey Bay area. I was studying a wetland restoration site there. I got to see it go from completely bare ground to being sparsely populated with plants in the 2 years that I worked there. And wetland restoration often takes a long time. The ground will be pretty bare for a while, and it can be hard to know, is the restoration really working? Should we have done something differently? That's kind of the whole reason that the regional monitoring program I work on now exists. So when I was studying the vegetation growth at this wetland restoration site, I ran models trying to understand what environmental factors are driving the locations where the plants are showing up. Is it elevation? Is it distance to channels or distance to the nearest seed sources? Is it salinity? Lots of other factors. And the models explained only a very small variation in the plants. And so I guess one of our hypotheses was that elevation would drive most of the variation, and it was the strongest variable, the strongest predictor. But I think this showed us that there are so many things that we weren't measuring using this approach, and it led us to developing more soil sampling studies. It led the team that was implementing the restoration project to testing out different techniques at the next phase of the restoration site. They did some things like churning up the soil at the site to see if these like pockets of soil would hold more seeds and help the plants grow, studying the groundwater patterns to see if that might be explaining where the plants are showing up. So I would say my research didn't really find the answer, but it led to a lot of additional questions that I think are helping the people implementing the restoration try and figure out what will make restoration most successful in the future.
So I was working on a project for the National Park Service in a sand dune system, back dunes. and we were doing a lot of restoration work, a lot of invasive species removal, but also we were seeding in a rare endangered plant. And after about 2 years, we started to notice a certain section of the area just not doing so well, just weed after weed coming up. We couldn't get really establishment of any of the rare plants. And someone decided that they were going to tie a camera onto a balloon and fly it up so we could get like sort of like a drone. This was many years ago, before drones. We looked at the pictures. This is more about finding data after the fact when you should have had it beforehand. We looked at the pictures, and it wasn't just one little area. It was actually a swath that we were noticing. And so we ended up going to the National Archives and looking at old photographs from the Army days back in the 40s. And lo and behold, guess what was right there? A road. A road. We were under the impression the road was taken out, but in reality, it had not. So without this data, we actually ended up digging down and finding asphalt. Here we are with missing data. That would have been really good to have if we had known about this road. We would have met success criteria much quicker than what it ended up taking us. Not from the balloon, but from the old aerial maps that the Army had produced from the 40s. Yeah.
That's a great, I'm sorry, just thinking.
San Francisco La Cindia.
That's interesting.
I now always look at historic photos before I do any restoration work.
It's a good idea. All right, so the next question is, what emerging tools do you see opening new directions for conservation work?
Who here uses AI? Who's used AI? Just a couple people? A couple. So I actually set up a ChatGPT request. I get an email once a week now about the latest peer research that's coming out, and I tie it to one of my 4 programs that I run, so invasive plants, fire-related, conservation grazing, or inventory monitoring. And so I get this email. I tried for the first 10 years of my career, I tried to read one peer research paper every single day. Didn't always work out every time, but I at least got through. I maybe not read the methods every time, but I definitely read other parts of it. As I've gone into my career, it's been harder and harder to do one a day, but I can do one a week. And so now I have ChatGPT helping me out. And I have found some really good papers from it. It's actually informed my fire program. It's informed our conservation grazing program. And so here's this tool that I have. It's almost like an intern in a way to, throw me a paper. And I just gave it a script asking it, hey, this is what I do. This is where I work. These are the things I'm interested in. And so now I get these papers once a week.
I heard you had an AI robot too, right?
We are working with a startup company right now that they are 3D printing a robot, and this robot uses cameras to look at weeds and to find those weeds in a field and destroy them. I'm a little nervous about it, I'll tell you. So what I ended up doing is we ended up telling them that they could use one of our areas that is a full-on weed patch. And we have both bowl thistle and milk thistle. And I told them, I want you to consider the bowl thistle a rare plant and the milk thistle invasive, and go kill all the invasive plants. So we're just starting to write up that research proposal to provide them a permit to do this on our lands, but it's a fun little activity.
I like that AI script for finding peer-reviewed articles. That's a good tip. Let's see. The kind of tools and technologies that came to mind for me were open data and reproducible methods, and tools that enable collaboration using these things. So a lot of my work, because I work at a regional government agency, is highly collaborative. And because I work on a small team and have all of these partners that are helping with projects, that also necessitates a lot of collaboration. And so we use GitHub a lot to collaborate on code, to share scripts with collaborators who want to build on them for their own projects. And we also use a lot of existing data. The shoreline access map I mentioned, we generated new data for it, but it was all based on existing data layers for parks, the Bay Trail, OpenStreetMap for roads. We used a Baylands habitat map that our wetland monitoring program produced, and American Community Survey data for demographics. So there's so much valuable information already out there, and so many questions that this data can answer. So we're both relying on open data, and also it's a core part of our monitoring program. All of the data that we collect on the wetlands around the Bay Area, we're putting into this open data platform so that other people can access it, and other people can contribute their own data to the repository if they're using the same methods. And the purpose of this open data sharing is so that we can all learn more from each other about the different restoration techniques and how things are progressing. And rather than having people required to collect their data to fulfill the permit requirements and then not doing anything with it, having it brought all together so that we can analyze it and learn from it. Yeah, I think that's all I was going to share.
Yeah, there's a huge push, sea change in in research that Alex is alluding to, is that open data accessibility. So now when you submit a paper for publication and they accept it, you have to put your data into a data repository. Yeah, and that's like in the last 5 years, it's been pretty much everyone's asking for that. So there's so much available data out there, citizen science data. I mean, so much. So, but and these and the methods I'm talking about here fall in the classification of you don't need to go out and harass your animals because honestly, going and capturing animals is one of the most invasive things we could do. There are reasons to do it, but but there are lots of ways, methods now, including existing data, but also there's a lot of research using acoustical data now. They're really great now, acoustical techniques and also equipment that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And there's a lot of research going on using acoustics. There's also a lot of research going on, and this is becoming relatively not too expensive, using environmental DNA, eDNA, whereby you can go out and collect some soil around something of interest, like a burrowing owl burrow, and you can find out what predators might have been there, So, and that's another amazing, non-invasive way of learning and exploring, very important questions.
That's great. And one thing I think I'd like to add is just on the GIS front. So right now on our website, we have an app called Trail Explorer. And it's kind of an interactive map where you have to click layers on and off to try to figure out where you can go hiking, biking, and all of that. But I think, and I had told my staff that in the future, when we go to update this app, it'll probably be more AI enabled, where people will expect to just ask questions to find where they should go instead of having to click themselves all the way through all the layers. So I think that could look very different in a few years. GIS isn't there yet, but possibly in 3-5 years. I'm seeing some demos of that. So, yeah. Great. Okay. So let's see. The last question we have is, how can early career professionals get involved in innovative projects like the ones you guys described?
Two come to mind. I've already mentioned one, iNaturalist. Put your data in there. It is beyond useful for land managers. We use it for so many different things. The other thing that we do, which has been extremely helpful, is Sun and Oak Death Blitz. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it's something we go out usually in April, May, June time period. We ask people to go and collect samples of trees. It gets sent to UC Berkeley, where they do DNA testing on it to figure out, is it Sun and Oak Death? And if it is it a particular type of lineage of Sun and Oak Death? In fact, last year we found a new variant of Sun and Oak Death that is, unfortunately, can kill trees at a higher temperature. So before, where Sun and Oak Death, we were seeing like sort of the stop of its range expansion was due to weather conditions. This new one actually can go farther than the old one. But that data we use for management. We use it in our fire program to determine where we're doing work. How clean do I need to send people into an area? Cleaning our equipment and cleaning our boots before doing work, and asking people when you come to open space, you see a boot brush, please use it. There's a reason why it's there. But cleaning off this equipment can be quite expensive, as you can imagine. And so anything I can do to sort of reduce costs, because if I can reduce costs on this project, I can put it towards another project. So we use that data to understand what is the risk involved with a certain project and how much money do we need to put into cleaning our equipment or providing trainings to folks. So we use it as risk management.
So my agency works with a lot of students and early career professionals. So I wanted to share a couple of the programs that we work with. We have started working with the UC Berkeley D Lab. It's a data lab at UC Berkeley, and we have a couple students who are just playing around with our shoreline access data and looking into some analyses of equity in the quality of access between different communities. So if you're a student, I would say be on the lookout for classes or programs at your school that offer opportunities to partner with external organizations to work on like a semester-long project. That's a really great way to get connected with people actually like doing the work outside of academia, and see the results of your work out in the world after the project is done. We also work with summer interns through the CSU Coast program. That's for both undergrads and grad students at CSUs. And we work with people on year-long fellowships. So there's the Sea Grant program, California Sea Grant State Fellows. I actually started at my agency 5 years ago as a Sea Grant Fellow. That is for people who have finished a postgraduate degree, like master's, PhD, JD. And then we also work with Civic Spark Fellows. We have one who just finished her undergrad. So if you're interested, check out these programs. I think they're a really great way to get your foot in the door and get into the field.
So there are a number of ways that you can be involved in programs just all by yourself. So for instance, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has various programs such as Feeder Watch, okay? And so if you have a bird feeder, you can be involved in Feeder Watch, where you collect data for them and submit that data. and learn about data collection and how that's done. So there are opportunities like that. There are a lot of organizations like Midpen, Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority that have volunteer programs where you can go out and work, do some work, for instance, on a restoration project. San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory, disclaimer, I'm on the board, has volunteer opportunities where you can go out and work on restoration projects, get a feel for that. The other thing I would say is that many professional organizations have early career programs. So for instance, the Wildlife Society has a very robust early career programs to help folks who are just starting out or early in their career to move along and find opportunities. And so these organizations can be super, super helpful.
Yeah, EDNA too. EDNA
Yes.
has a lot of opportunity for volunteering to them and learning how to do it, EDNA and stuff. Just nice.
It's fantastic.
And Midpen has internships as well. We get about 4 interns for one for GIS and one for natural resources, three for natural resources and one for GIS. And 2 for planning, and construction engineering. So we do have a bunch of internships every year. And for me, I would say if someone's wanting to get into GIS or remote sensing, when you're taking your classes, I think it'd be really valuable when you have your project, maybe reach out to another researcher at a university that doesn't do GIS or remote sensing and see if you can help them and do a real world project. Because what's really important is that you understand the software, using it, and bringing those projects and being able to speak to those projects in interviews is very valuable. So it's not just taking classes, but also being able to speak to it as well. Okay. All right. So now we're ready for questions. All right.
To add to that, in the ArcGIS Pro Online, it's only $100 a year these days. It's totally different from when we started with, SB product early on. There were thousands of dollars a year. So anybody, I'm sure you probably spend $100 a year or something else. So if you want to play with the software and come up with your forms and do, your little project, even independent, like in your neighborhood, like invent species in your neighborhood or whatever. You can, the tools are out there and they're available to us, so that really cheap price. So yeah, visit.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I think if you're a student, depending on where you are, you might be getting them for free as well. So yeah, but that's good to share that too. Yes. So we'll start with him. Yes.
Seconding that, I did my master's and took some GIS classes, and all your fees for ArcGIS getting waived entirely as a student.
As a student, yes. Yeah.
For a year.
For a year.
Yep, per year.
After.
It's full. That's why you take another GIS class.
And then you can get them. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, keep your skills up and learn new things. There's plenty to learn about it. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm actually a volunteer with Midpen, and I do land stewardship projects.
Oh, okay. Great.
It was really interesting to hear about the resource management, and I'll ask questions on our projects kind of about risk management, and I would love if you could elaborate on how you guys delineate what is super important, how much the data influences that, and how much just your own knowledge and experience also influences that.
Yeah, that's a excellent question. So I unfortunately live in an office behind a computer screen and live vicariously through all of you who are going out for hikes, but also our staff members. And so we use, I talked about the conservation value. We use that as one indicator of not risk, but of something that we want to protect, something that we're very nervous about. And so we know where those hotspots are. We also know where the invasive species are. We have a pretty good handle of invasive species throughout the area. We also have a pretty good handle of sudden oak death. Now, sudden oak death is a pathogen, one of 120 somewhat pathogens in the same sort of family. And we are just now starting to learn some of those other pathogens and where they're at and what damage they can do in the environment. So, what we're talking about here is what we call biosecurity. And so when in doubt, anybody here have heard of the, oh my gosh, I just totally blanked. Something principle. Someone help me. I can't remember now. What's that? There it is, precautionary principle. I knew somebody would know this. When in doubt, when we don't have the data, we want to be cautious. We want to make sure that we are not doing more harm than good, unintentionally or not. And so that is something that we consider. So a lot of our equipment, no matter where we've been, gets sprayed down with alcohol to kill off all those pathogens. We ask people to brush off their shoes, or we have bike brushes as well to brush off that. We actually had an intern a couple years ago collect all the soil underneath the boot brushes to see what would grow from that. And it was actually pretty surprising what came up and how long it came up for. So they do work. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I had a question to you, Coty. How do you go about sampling oak trees and sending them to UC Berkeley?
Yeah, so we put on a volunteer event every year. This year, I believe it's going to be June 30th, but it's advertised on our volunteer webpage. You come in and you get a training by our forest ecologist, Ari, who's actually here. You might have talked to her at one of the Midpen booths. I'll be there as well. My son comes out too because he loves doing this. But we train you on what to look for. And we actually don't sample oak trees. We actually sample the vectoring species. So it's going to be tan oaks and it's going to be bay laurels. So you get a training on what to look for. You collect that information. You put it into a little envelope. Fill out the metadata that we need because we all love metadata. And then it gets stored in a cooler, and then that gets shipped off to Berkeley. Yeah.
And cause for Alex, I was wondering when you're talking about the analyzing the plant growth on the wetland you're restoring, I was wondering if you publicized that data at all?
Yes, because when I submitted the paper I wrote on it, it was required to publish the data in a repository. So yeah, for that project, we had both field data. We collected it along quadrats, percent cover of vegetation in the quadrats. And then we also had remote sensing data. So I classified aerial imagery to show where the plants were and where they weren't. And I think at least the quadrat data set was published. I think the samples, I distributed random sample points in the classified imagery to run a model. So I think that data was also published. I don't remember what the repository was, but feel free to come up to me after if you want to talk more.
Yes.
This question is just for whoever wants to answer. If you're more on the environmental side of things, how important has it been to have a personal knowledge of how data systems work? And then just vice versa, if you're more on the data side, how important has it been to have personal knowledge of the environment?
You should take it from me. You got a GIS certificate and you've been on the environmental side, but for being on the GIS side, it's been, for me, for my career, it's been really valuable, especially getting the first job, because then I have knowledge of both things. So my master's is in natural resource management and environmental planning, but I did focus on GIS and doing predictive habitat modeling, because GIS, it is a tool. And if you want to use it for the environment, it's very good to know about the environment. If you want to be behind the scenes and be the database manager and just focus on the technology, upgrading the server, making sure all your services are up, that's a different kind of focus, then you could just go in the technology realm, right? But if you're wanting to do more modeling, environmental modeling, and it would be good to have a little bit of that background.
Like I said, I live behind a computer now, unfortunately. And you know, I tell my boss every single time, my favorite or my new best restoration opportunities was the last place I just visited. And so there is so much information you can gather from going out into this, out and seeing what you're looking at. And so if you are a data nerd, you know, I asked, we had to get some GIS modeling done, or GIS GPS collection happening. And I asked the GIS intern to actually go out and collect the data so he could get a real life situation of going out, collecting tree data for us. It's extremely important to see both of the aspects. I'll tell you right now, data management is like, we hear about how much data there is, the repository and all that. Data management is going to be the next big thing that I think is just, I get like over my head in data. So if you know data management, you're going to get a good job.
It's good to know what tools are out there, what GIS can do. Even if you don't know how to do it yourself, it's good to know what it can do and its possibilities.
And that was part of the benefit of me going through the GIS classes, is then I could ask my GIS folks, I know you guys can do this.
Yeah.
Can you do this analysis for me?
That's what happened. I was
Yes.
wondering. You guys have more questions?
I just have a kind of a general question about the things we are facing nowadays with these mega data centers and environment.
Yes.
And how do you feel about this? Like, would be, if you want to share any kind of insight? Yeah.
I mean, okay, so I'm hoping, I mean, I think there needs to be, so in Santa Clara County, or yeah, in the city of Santa Clara, they're not adding any more data centers. So there's regulations for data centers in the city of Santa Clara. But in other states, they're not as regulated. I know Microsoft, they have a big climate action plan that they're getting to like a net zero carbon footprint by, I forget when, I just read it, but I don't remember. And data centers are blowing up. I mean, RAM prices are increasing because there's just so many more data centers. But I'm hoping that things will become more efficient and that it won't increase at the rate that is increasing. Midpen isn't using AI too much. I mean, we are conscious of the environmental impact. So we're working on an AI policy right now. So we don't have anything right now. So yeah.
Just to be clear, when I use ChatGPT, that's on my phone at home.
I realize we're not allowed to use it yet. We're trying to be really, cautious about it. So, yeah, I'm hoping the problem will get solved with regulation, and maybe AI will help AI become more efficient. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have anything about that to say.
Well, fortunately, I live with an economist because I really hate thinking about money. And and he's like, money is the signal. So one of the things that's likely to happen is because they take so much energy, we're going to be starting to pay for that. And that will result in big pushback. So those are the kind of sort of unexpected avenues where you might, find some pushback on it. And they have to get more efficient. They have to.
Yeah, and there's already supply chain issues because the data centers are gobbling up RAM. So things are already starting to get okay.
I had a question. If you're somebody who has a career but wants to get into any of the work that you guys are doing, so it's not an early
like a career change.
Yeah. Would you guys suggest the same advice or anything else?
I mean, it depends what your background is. So what I have seen some people wanting to get in GIS, but they were already an applications person or database person, then they could do a GIS certificate program. They have them at San Francisco State or at Foothill College. But if you're not, you don't have that computer background, then I might recommend a master's program, because some of these certificate programs, they take a long time. I mean, not the San Francisco State GIS program, but the Foothills. So I think a master's program is so great, because then you meet people, like you have other colleagues that are going to that grad school that have jobs, and then you get your whole network. So I think that's a great. What do you guys?
Well, thank you, Casey. I thought I was going to have to say that, so
Okay.
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And master's is less work than a bachelor's degree. If you don't already have a master's, it's less units, and you might end up getting your job before you finish your thesis. So and you can take night classes. It's much more. It's easier to work full time.
Yeah.
I actually have a response to that. When I did my master's, half of my lab mates were using their master's as a pivot. Like they came from prior backgrounds like acting and history, and they wanted to get into environmental stuff. So within their master's, they work on project, and both of them actually now have jobs long term. I don't know how short after graduation. So yeah, it absolutely is a really good strategy.
Yeah, and the state colleges aren't very expensive either.
Yeah, I wanted to. That's a really great point. I've had many students come from very different backgrounds. It's a great opportunity to say, I'm going to take a left turn or a right turn. I'm going over here. So it's a great opportunity to, redirect where you're going. Yeah.
I'll just add one thing from my perspective, having reviewed a lot of Sea Grant Fellow applications over the years, and some of them have been career changes, and it's definitely a really unique and I think actually appealing thing to see, because one, that what they have switched to, they are really passionate about, because they took the step to make that switch. And two, you can definitely frame it as a huge asset, whatever this other experience is that you have, because that's going to set you apart from the rest of the candidates.
Is there any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing all your stories.